Hi, I'm Ted London, Senior Research Fellow and Director of the Base of the Pyramid Initiative at the William Davidson Institute at the University of Michigan. And today I'm here with Farouk Jiwa, who is now with Care Canada, but previously with HoneyCare Africa. And Farouk, would you mind introducing yourself and talking a little bit about your background, particularly with relation to how you think about the base of the pyramid as producers?
Sure. I'm originally from Kenya, and I was one of the co-founders of HoneyCare Africa, which is a social enterprise primarily focusing on trying to promote community-based beekeeping in East Africa. One of the things that we've been able to do quite successful with HoneyCare is to find an income-generating activity for the people at the bottom of the pyramid. The focus has been on trying to introduce the right technology to the smallholder farmers, finding the most appropriate mechanism for them to be able to access the financing that they require, providing very succinct training to them, and most important, providing them with a guaranteed market to buy the honey back from them. I've recently now joined Care Canada to set up a unit called Care Enterprise Partners, which seeks to draw on the experience that I've had with HoneyCare, but also try and build on the work that Care Canada has done in this space, and focus on market-based approaches to poverty reduction, with a specific emphasis on how do we help to create value at the bottom of the pyramid, particularly from the production side of the equation.
So, sort of thinking first about your experiences with HoneyCare, I know that it took you a while, but in the end you developed a very interesting, what I think you call a tripartite model. Could you talk a little bit about that and kind of how you aligned in the incentives of the different sectors?
Absolutely. I think the one thing we were looking for more than anything else was to find ways in which the private sector that was primarily, operating in its own sphere, and the development organization that were doing their own thing, to try and bring them together and to try to elaborate what the value proposition was for the private sector, the development organization, the rural community to come together, and to try and look for the alignment of incentives wherever possible. And the way this mechanism works is the development organizations have certainly the incentive and the objective of trying to help the communities increase their incomes. The private sector certainly has the business smarts and the ability to be able to provide the technical training and the ability to buy the product. And the communities, of course, the ultimate beneficiaries, but also the producers of the raw material. And the tripartite model really tries to realign these three partners who traditionally normally not work together, and bring them together to say that if they operated in a partnership, there would be an opportunity for them to create a symbiosis that's going to be a win-win-win proposition for all three concerned.
I mean, sort of the core of the HoneyCare model is developing local beekeeping enterprises.
Correct.
What did in that sense that those at the BOP are now producing something, in this case honey.
Yes.
What have you learned about working in Kenya with those at the BOP providing honey? What kind of things did you learn, and what surprised you as you went along?
Well, I think the first thing that surprised me was just the willingness of people to actually get involved in new technology, their ability to learn very quickly, and to produce high quality product. One of the things that I think was the biggest challenge for us was overcoming the barriers that existed traditionally. The government in Kenya was not able to provide farmers with access to technology. Financing was a challenge, and training was fairly patchy and weak. And by dealing with those three things, we learned very quickly that farmers have the capacity to be able to produce things. But the farmers also expect a lot of things from us as well. And one of the most important things is to be able to pay for the produce on time. So as HoneyCare, we have a simple policy called Money for Honey, where we pay farmers cash within 48 hours of harvest. The fact that we're able to do this compared to the way that government parastatals operate, for example, in the coffee sector, the pyrethrum sector, the cotton sector, where it can take up to 6 to 8 months to be paid, was certainly a big difference. And that's probably one of the key success factors that has resulted in HoneyCare getting the kind of traction it's gotten on the ground. But we also learned that there were some challenges with regard to the bottom of the pyramid. One of them has certainly been farmers are being very opportunistic and very short term. So how does one enforce legal contracts with them? If you have a contract where they're supposed to be supplying a particular product to you, how do you ensure they don't sell the honey for a slightly higher price to one of your competitors? It's impossible to take small farmers to court, and there is no way that you can legally enforce that. But we learned there were social pressure mechanisms that you could use by either not buying honey from farmers who had deviated, or having the community sometimes police themselves to ensure that the neighbors abided by the contracts that they had signed up for.
So it sounds like there are two issues that emerge around sort of looking at the BOP as producers, and one is the constraints they face in their environment, and the other is maybe the actions that they might perform while operating.
Correct.
I mean, when you began to do this, why couldn't they do this themselves? You know, why do you need a honey care to come in and do this? You know, why do you need an external organization to facilitate these activities?
I think there are primarily three reasons that I can think of. The first one would certainly be trying to help to facilitate their access to the technology and the information. You need to find a mechanism through which you can disseminate the information and the technology to the communities. The second thing certainly is on the marketing side of things, to be able to be willing to be able to buy the produce from communities and to help them access markets which they were not traditionally able to do. And I think the third thing, which is probably the most important one, is aggregation. How do you get all the smallholder farmers together that are producing 150 kilos of honey, 20 kilos of honey, and aggregate the produce together so it becomes economically interesting and it becomes commercially viable? You cannot, for example, as a smallholder farmer producing 100 kilos of honey, sell your product into the supermarket. But when you have 3,000 farmers or 30,000 farmers, all of a sudden you're able to commercially produce the volumes and meet the demands of the market on an ongoing basis.
When you think about value sort of created across the three partners, right? The development sector,
Right.
the honey care, which is the private sector organization, local communities. How do you make sure that everyone gets, I don't know how you say this, the appropriate amount of value? How do you ensure a relatively equitable or even distribution, a fair distribution of the value that's created?
I think that the first thing that you need to do is you need to be able to drill down to be able to understand what the value expectations are from each one of the stakeholders. And once we're better able to understand what the community wants from this partnership, what the development organizations want, and certainly what the incentives are for the private sector, that is probably a good sort of foundation on which you can build this partnership. It's certainly very important to have the development organizations there initially, not just to provide the financing, but to also be the arbitrator and mediator in the system between the community and the private company. Private companies, by definition of who they are and the sort of fiduciary responsibility they have to their shareholders, normally have a tendency to try and maximize profitability. And an easy way of doing it is to reduce the price of your raw material by reducing the price at which you're buying from the farmers. Now, although honey care is certainly very clear in terms of its social enterprise objectives, other private companies may not necessarily have that staying power to be able to continue to buy at what would be considered fair trade prices. So having that development organization in there for the initial period to police the system and to also be that judge and jury that you could go to when there was a dispute between the community and the private sector organization is certainly a very important way to retain that value for the parties concerned.
And by creating social value or value that, being an equitable, fair partner, does that create a competitive advantage for honey care?
I think so. I mean, when you look at the model that we've come up with, I had two options when I was designing how we would do our honey production. One would have been to go with large-scale farmers and produce honey in a few geographically constricted areas. But because I'm working with smallholder farmers across the entire country, which I would not have been able to do if I had to invest in the land and the farms myself, I'm now able to produce honey around the year. And that's a very simple way in which I've been able to generate value because I'm working with smallholder farmers. On the market side of the equation, I think it's been a bit of a challenge. People certainly buy our honey in Kenya because we work with rural communities and women. But I wouldn't say that the market necessarily compensates me in the entirety for the additional logistic and infrastructure costs that I bear because I work with scattered clusters of farmers. But we are able to command a better price. Farmers are producing a better quality of product as well. And because we're one of the few people that are willing to go and work with the farmers off the main grid, off the main roads, they see us as being an important commercial partner for them. And they do their very best to be able to produce the highest quality product possible.
One of the things you're evolving towards, or you're beginning to add to, is right now you have those at the base of the pyramid selling further up the economic pyramid. But you're also now thinking about having those at the base of the pyramid not only sell you the product, and then you would then sell that product back to the base of the pyramid. So they become producers as well as buyers. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's one of those little interesting things we're trying at the moment. And it's a simple idea of what in the US is called honey sticks. And these are simple little drinking straws that are about 25 grams and filled with honey and sealed on both ends. What we would like to be able to do is try and meet the demand that exists at the local community level for the honey that is being produced as well. Some of our farmers, when they're selling the honey to us, keep a small amount of honey for their own domestic consumption. But all of their neighbors as well require good quality honey. Now, I always joke about the fact that Kenya produces some of the best coffee in the world, but yet we drink the worst coffee in Kenya because all the good stuff goes outside. We want to try and avoid that with honey. There is a latent demand for good quality honey at every niche and every level in the country, and certainly the bottom of the pyramid is no exception. So through the honey sticks, and what we're trying to do here is to try and leverage the collection centers we've been able to establish and use them as distribution channels to be able to sell the honey back into the communities where some of the honey is being produced as well.
As I recall, you have a large percentage of the market share. So you're growing the market share, but you're also growing the market as well.
Absolutely, because I think one of the things we realized very quickly is the demand for honey and the market for honey is quite elastic. And we're not going to really know when we reach the saturation point until we try. And finding smarter ways in which we can sell the honey to untapped markets is probably one of the easiest ways to grow the market as well.
Maybe the last question about honey care. What is your market share now, and who have you displaced as you've grown?
From the last assessment we did, our market share is approximately 68%. And one of the key things that we've been able to do is, I think, two things. The first thing is we've been able to improve the quality of local honey that's being produced. When we first started, the two major types of honey you were able to buy was either imported honey from Australia, India, or the United States, or very poorly produced, low-quality honey in plastic bottles with leaking jars from Kenya. Both of those have changed. So I have more sophisticated national competition. I have a lot of other companies that have copied the honey care model and come out to produce a higher quality product. But certainly the Australian honey, the Indian honey, and the American honey is much harder to find on the supermarket shelves than 6 years ago when we started.
Maybe I will ask you one more question. Can you talk a little bit about the financial returns of honey care?
At the moment, we were able to break even in 2004. 2005 was profitable. This financial year, because we made a large investment in Tanzania, we're probably going to be making an operating loss. But we have now tried to separate some of the most expensive aspects of our operation, which is the community aspect, the collection of the honey, into a separate foundation with not just the objective of trying to increase the efficiency of the business, but also trying to look at ways in which the foundation can operate a lot better. We hope that disaggregation of the costs is going to increase the profitability of honey care this year as well.
Okay, let me transition now. We're going to stay in Kenya, but we'll kind of move to veg care.
Right.
And this is something you've been working on over the last year or so with Care Canada, although I think it's been in place for longer than that.
Correct.
Can you give us a little background on what veg care is?
Absolutely. Well, veg care is a joint venture partnership between Care Kenya and Veg Pro. Veg Pro is a limited liability company. It's the second largest horticulture exporter from Kenya. And what we were able to do here is demonstrate the value proposition to both the community, to Care, and to Veg Pro for the formation of a limited liability company that was a partnership. And Veg Pro needs the vegetables that our smallholder farmers are producing. Veg Care facilitates that process by providing farmers with loans so they're able to access the inputs, do some of the quality control work for the vegetables that are being produced by the farmers, aggregate it, and then on-sell it into the market. We're currently working with about 455 farmers, and they're producing 30 tons of vegetables per week. The vegetables that are collected this morning end up at supermarkets like Tesco's and Sainsbury's in the UK the following morning.
And what is Care Canada or CEP's role in this? What would you call yourself?
Well, Care Enterprise Partners is playing a number of different roles in this. The first one certainly is as an investor, because Care Kenya is a country office that is managed by Care Canada. The second role that we play is in trying to demonstrate the market opportunity through the veg care example for other people in horticulture, to be able to make the case for why it makes sense to be able to work with smallholder farmers. And at the moment, we're also certainly playing a lead role in the management and the governance of the organization. Although the staff that actually run veg care are not Care staff, we sit on the board of directors, and we actually have the chair for this year. So we try and provide the direction strategically, but also, I think, financially, to ensure the company is moving in the right direction.
And to some degree, veg care plays kind of a bridging role between the smallholder farmers and your joint venture partner.
Correct. I think it's really talking about how does one bridge the divide between the informal economy and the formal economy. We need to be able to find entities and mechanisms that are going to allow for the free flow of goods and services between the top and the bottom of the pyramid. And veg care sits right in between there to be able to try and facilitate this in a manner that is both transparent but economically efficient as well.
And with VegCare, you're working with the base of the pyramid as producers, and you've obviously had some successes, but also some lessons. What have you learned, and what strategy have you employed to kind of enhance the model?
I think there are probably two lessons that I can pick on off the top of my head. The first one would certainly be when we initially developed the model, the farmers would have to pay us a percentage of the gross profit that earned. But we learned the farmers were much smarter entrepreneurs than we were. So they would normally not declare a very high gross profit and therefore not have to pay the commission. We've now changed the model so that now they have to pay us a commission for any sales of vegetables they have that is facilitated through us. The second thing we learned as well is, and it's a big challenge in horticulture, which is side selling, where if you have a contract with a particular farmer, he may or may not sell his entire harvest to you, because for 2 shillings per kilogram more, 3 shillings a kilogram more, they can sell it to another competitor. We've had to come down fairly hard on this one, because we would like to be able to have some level of a commitment from the community to be able to abide by the contracts they've signed. So if farmers are found to be side selling, we normally cut them off, which means they will be blacklisted and not be able to supply vegetables to the company anymore. So that has dropped the number of farmers we're working with from 750 to 455. And we think that's perfectly okay, because at the end of the day, we would like to be able to work with people who understand the commercial value and respect legal contracts as well. We would also like to be able to ensure that through demonstration, as we begin to work with these smallholder farmers who have demonstrated the staying power and the willingness to abide by these contracts, we believe that some of the other farmers may come back to us over a period of time and take the opportunity that is being provided more seriously as well.
Do you get any pushback? This sounds like this is kind of to some degree hard-headed business. Which,
Sure.
From a business perspective, that makes a lot of sense. We're going to keep our reliable suppliers. Those that aren't, we'll let them go and blacklist them or whatever else. But from a development perspective, to some degree, development has been designed to help those that are most in need, and those that are better off, maybe you would consider your entrepreneurs that are successful, would be the ones who get less attention.
Correct.
How do you justify that within the development community? Say that these are the ones that we're not. They might need our help, but we're not going to work with them anymore.
Right. Well, I think what we're trying to do here is really sustainable development, and sustainable development is an enigma. We don't know what the answer is. But if we were to continue working with the farmers that were side selling their produce, it means the profitability of VegCare will be reduced, because we're providing a service for which the fee is not being paid back to us. If we want to continue to be able to help those 455 farmers and their families, the communities within which they live, then we have to ensure that VegCare as an entity is commercially viable as well. And if that means that we have to take some hard decisions, then I think that's a price I think that is worth paying. Because at the end of the day, we would like to be able to ensure that we continue to add value to these communities 10, 15, 20, 40 years down the road. And this can only be done if VegCare as an entity is commercially viable as well.
How do you scale VegCare then? I mean, you're working with 450 farmers. Are there options for scaling this to have a larger impact?
Absolutely. I think there are two things that we have to look at. Certainly from VegCare and the base that it has in Kibera, which is in south of Nairobi, in the eastern province. We could probably try and increase the number of farmers that we're working with there. But I think what's probably going to work out a lot better would be to replicate this model, as we're trying to do at the moment with East African growers in Western Kenya, and work with other private sector organizations that would also like to be able to learn how to work with people at the bottom of the pyramid. That, we think, is probably the opportunity for scaling by taking the VegCare model and transferring it to other parts of the country.
Kind of a last question about VegCare, again, kind of the financial. How are you doing? How is that entity doing financially?
We've made an operating loss. This is the second year. We made a small operating loss of about $30,000. The business plan projection that we have is a break even after 3.5 years. So we have another 1.5 years to go. Hopefully, we should be able to break even by then.
And kind of bringing all these. You've done a lot of work now with different BOP ventures, BOP ventures, working with those at the base of the pyramid, viewing them as producers.
Right.
What lessons, kind of broadly, have you learned about working with BOP as producers?
A number of lessons. I think the first one certainly is the power of aggregation. When you finally are able to aggregate the produce that is being grown by smallholder farmers or produced by smallholder farmers in the case of handicrafts, you are finally able to create the economies of scale that make it commercially viable for the private sector entities to get involved. Secondly, I think aggregation also helps to address the asymmetry of power around the bargaining table between the private company and the smallholder farmers. When farmers have the capacity to produce a couple of 100 tons of any particular commodity, they have just as much weight around the bargaining table with a private company as a private company does as well. We've also learned that it's very important to try and increase the efficiency of the transactions and the transparency of the transactions. So sometimes we have to provide small grants to build collection centers, to set up weighing scales, so that we're able to facilitate the process through which the smallholder farmers are able to ensure that they're getting the full value for the commodities that they're selling. Finally, I'd probably point to the lesson that you've already picked up, which is we have to be commercially driven in terms of how we work with the bottom of the pyramid as producers. Certainly the development component is an important one, but we also have to be able to place a sustainability lens in front of that development perspective to ensure that it continues to operate in an economically and commercially viable manner.
Well, thank you, Farouk, for talking, and I look forward to continuing discussions and checking back with you again soon to see how things are going.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.